Hello, welcome to Reclaim Within. I am Ash. My prayer is that today's episode invites you to move beyond your distortions and remember that the blessings are all around you. This week, I'm going to share about how I was reminded that distortions are actually not punishments, but teachers, mirrors that guide us back into alignment with life itself when we understand how to work with it. Last month, I hosted a retreat for one of my teachers, and it was such a potent weekend because I myself got to participate and be in the learning experience in a way that I don't normally participate. A lot of the times I'm the one holding and facilitating the container. This time I just organized it. And one of the most beautiful takeaways from the weekend was really embodying how much we, each and every one of us, we are the medicine. We came together to celebrate our ability to transform and to remember that life is a true gift from God. My teacher says God, the gift of divinity. And it is through this remembering process that each and every one of us become the authors of our beliefs, our thoughts, our tapestry of what we're weaving in our life, and we learn from the intelligence of our emotions. What stayed with me the most from this retreat is just how blessed we are to walk on this earth and how blessings are truly all around us, just waiting for us to step into the consciousness that allows them to be witnessed, and how the timeline that we are dreaming of that is just beyond our understanding is actually already within us. We simply need to align to the magic, to the creation, co-creational ability to connect to it, because anything we desire first needs to be cultivated within. So why are we not all building our own inner kingdoms and co-creating with life? Why does it feel like so many humans feel stuck? Well, that is exactly what I want to explore today. I want to explore why so many humans walk around the world stuck, disconnected, and sick. This is what I know for sure. It's definitely not because that's who any of us actually are. It is because of the distortions that we have inherited or picked up on within collective agreements. In the intricate tapestry of our human experience, distortions weave themselves into how we see and how we interact with the world around us. They color our perceptions, and they often pull us away from the sacredness of life that is always present. It is always here. It's the distortions that pull us away from the harmony of the moment. So let's break it down. What are distortions? Really, can we shape how we are perceived? And how do the wounds of our past create these distortions in the first place? So these questions to me open us up into a deeper truth that distortions really are not just tricks of the mind. I have witnessed them as more of an invitation that's calling us to take responsibility for our own inner world so that we can illuminate and transform and return home to the wholeness that life always offers us. Distortions are this false interpretation of reality. They are shaped through the interplay of our beliefs and the world around us. Distortions may serve as coping mechanisms in times of pain, but when they go left unchecked, they really truly confine us, and they narrow our capacity to actually live in alignment with the sacred flow of life. A distortion can be deeply personal, like believing that we are unworthy despite all of the evidence of our beauty and success. Distortions can be purely emotional, feeling hurt and personally affronted that someone came home late, in your life, taking it as an insult that they don't want to spend time with you, rather than orienting to what was actually happening in that person's day that made them late in the first place. Distortions often come in relational spaces and distort our emotional experience or our emotional reality and put the blame on whoever the other person in the relationship dynamic is. These emotional distortions can really take away from our connection time. They can actually pull us further away from the person that we deeply desire to be more connected to. Distortions can also be collective, like cultural narratives that keep us from honoring ourselves or witnessing the beauty in our differences. A distortion is like looking into a pond and believing the rippled reflection is actually the truth of your face. The reflection is real, yes, but it is not the wholeness of you. It is shaped by the water, the wind, the light, and everything that has touched that pond. In the same way, our perceptions are shaped by what has touched us in our lives, the ways that our families operated, the losses that we've gone through in our lives, our own traumatic experiences, our heartbreaks that we've lived through, and our longings, the deep longing that we have for our life and what we desire for it to look like. So at the core, distortions are a mirror, not to the outside world, but to our inner world. The reflections of unhealed stories just waiting for integration, waiting for us to be able to actually bring them back into communion with the sacred or with our own orientation to understanding, to beauty, to grace, to compassion. I think it's important to understand that we actually all play with perception. Every single one of us, consciously or unconsciously, we are constantly crafting how we are seen by others and perceiving others through our own lenses. And a lot of times this is actually just harmless. It's harmless self-expression to craft how we are seen by others. But at other times, it actually masks orientation. It puts us in a category that actually separates us, not just from the people around us, but from ourselves. I was working with a client the other week, and we found there's this really core place where she was taught that people aren't safe and that you have to only give people what they want to hear and not bring yourself into the relationship. It's causing a lot of hurt and a lot of pain because her authentic self isn't actually allowed through this belief structure, through this distortion, to be brought to the table. When we role play, when we slip into personas that we think are expected of us, we actually, at that moment, project and place our own longings or insecurities onto others. We're masking, we're hiding our own vulnerabilities behind this carefully constructed image. And this is where distortions run rampant. This is where the distortions of self-presentation, they're not inherently wrong because it's part of being human, but the invitation is actually to notice that when the mask no longer serves, where you're actually blocking your own sense of self and your own authenticity from the experience that you're in. When I would feel vulnerable, when I would feel overwhelmed, I used to hide. I used to go into a deep hiding place when I would have really big feelings. And a lot of times people would perceive me as being uncaring because I didn't respond or I didn't communicate with them in a timely fashion. And the truth was I was feeling very overwhelmed and I didn't have proper boundaries within my own self or with others to be able to communicate what I was actually feeling because I felt so much shame around it. There was so many distortions that I had to move through to be able to actually start to share my process with other people. This practice of sharing a podcast and a newsletter has been really helpful in the healing of that, to be able to actually bring my own experience and my own lived wisdom out to the table, hoping that the stories I share and what I've gone through and the concepts I've learned in studying consciousness for the last decade will actually help you too in being able to navigate your own inner world. When the distortion blocks us from who we really are, we slowly start to feel lonelier in our life. start to feel more depressed or more anxious, because we're not bringing our fullness to the table. We're not actually allowing for our soul to move through our being. And so it's important to understand that when we set down the distortion, when we allow ourselves to actually start to be more authentic and let that shine through, that's where we get to learn so much more about who we are and how we're here to interact with the world. One of the things I've learned about distortions is that I used to perceive them as punishments, and they're not actually punishments. They can definitely hurt at times, especially when you don't see it coming. It's really, really easy to get stuck in victim consciousness and feel as if the world is punishing you, or as if no one understands you. But truly, truly, when you can see that the distortion that you have, whether it's on a physical, spiritual, emotional, collective, relational level, it's here to actually guide you back into coherence. It's just the distortion. Once you can see it and feel it, you can then work with it. Awareness is 50% always. So each time I find a new distortion in my system or in my relationship with someone, I now have learned that I get to lean into the discomfort to actually be able to see it more clearly. And every time I do that, I reclaim within a piece of my wholeness. And I am able to then touch more compassion in myself and embody more of my humanity, more of the ability to hold my my sorrows and my fears and the distortions, and also the things that make me beautiful and funny and joyful. It's actually practicing holding both, which is the good and the bad, the right and the wrong, holding more of our humanity. The practice of learning from the distortions is really just to ask yourself questions. So if you feel an activation or tension arising, noticing yourself maybe telling a negative story, you can start then once you notice it. And sometimes you don't notice it until too late, and that's okay. That's how patterns work. But you can always ask yourself these questions. So even it could either be in the present tense, or you could ask yourself these questions of when I was feeling that way. So when I was feeling that way, what am I believing? Or if you're doing it in the moment, what am I believing right now? So for an example, let's say that my friend said they're going to come over and they came over an hour and a half late. And so in that moment, what am I believing right now? Am I believing that I am not valuable to them? Am I believing that they don't care about me? What's the belief? And then, is this the whole truth? That's the second question. Is the thing I'm believing right now the whole truth? Or could it actually be a distortion? And then where does this distortion come from? Meaning, does it have an origin point? Because it's probably not from this exact experience. 9 times out of 10, it's from a previous experience. What wound or fear is this pointing me towards? So if I'm feeling like my friend doesn't care about me or doesn't value me, there might be an earlier wound of not feeling seen or valued or cherished earlier on in my life. And that might be bringing up a fear here and now. And then try to see what might this distortion be trying to protect in me. Maybe it's trying to protect me from not feeling abandoned or not feeling alone. And when you can actually start to understand the distortion and why it's there, you can start having compassion for, oh, okay, this makes sense. This reminds me of, my earlier life. Okay, I can have more compassion for myself. I understand why I'm seeing through this distorted lens right now. And then when your friend actually arrives a little late, instead of jumping on them and being like, how come you don't care about me and you're late, or giving them the silent treatment, you can actually start to then ask, hey, what was happening for you? Why were you late? What was going on in your inner world? This is what happened for me. This opens up such an amazing depth of relationship when you can practice this, when you can actually practice catching yourself in your own distortions of the stories that you're telling, get clear of why, be able to cultivate that compassion inside of yourself of, okay, well, that makes sense. I'm doing it because of this thing, or because of this younger moment that happened, or that's how my grandfather or my brother used to make me feel, whatever it is. But once you understand that, it actually becomes such a simple and potent tactic. I try to teach all my people to actually shift into asking questions anytime there's tension, within or relationally. And being able to use these questions in moments of activation actually turns witnessing into a practice of compassion and not shaming, which is a really potent shift and really powerful for most of us. What happens when we wear the distortions of our past, and that example I had used, the problem is what's happening is that the unresolved trauma is one of the greatest weavers of distortion. So when we do not tend to our wounds, we end up wearing them like clothes that don't fit, and they actually shape our perceptions, and they shape how we interact with the people that we love in our lives or the people that we work with. The distortions of worthlessness rooted in old failures or childhood wounds will make us perpetually feel inadequate. The distortion of unlovability is born from relational pain, and it can close our hearts to love. It can close our hearts to the love that is actually always here for us. Another example that I see a lot is the distortion of control. It's often tied to fear or safety. And it can cause us to cling so tightly to certainty that we actually lose our ability to see other people, to witness like the goodness in other people, to actually be able to even flow with the unfolding of life at all. It creates a lot of rigidity in our system so that we miss being present with the beauty of life. And all of these different distortions can really dominate our present experience and loop us back even when we have awareness. So it can feel really frustrating. And yet, as Rumi once said, the wound is the place where the light enters you. So every single time that an old wound is resurfacing for any of us, it's actually just another opening, another opportunity to reclaim more compassion, more humanity, and more of our own sacred wholeness. I know for me, I had a physical ailment that was ongoing for multiple years, and I didn't know what it was. I didn't know why. And I finally figured out that there was an actual infection in my tooth that had been there for a very long time. And the distortion in my body was that I kept going to this fight or flight response. I kept having really high cortisol, and it was distorting my reality. It was a physical distortion in my body. And it was triggering a lot of my primary trauma, like my earlier life trauma. And once I figured it out, once I figured out that I actually had an infection and that's why my physical body was going through the distortion, the amount of clarity I feel like I have on the other side and understanding how secondary traumas actually trigger primary traumas, which is very helpful for me to really have a lived experience of in the work that I do. I feel so much more compassion and understanding for why healing is a difficult path and why it's not so clean cut and clear cut all the time. It's given me a lot. So there's like a lot of light that's come through and a lot of understanding and clarity that's come through, even though it was really hard to move through it while I was in the distortion. To transcend the distortion is not to deny it, but to illuminate it and to transform it. And this requires massive amounts of self-responsibility. Some of my favorite tools to cultivate within to transform the distortions are first and foremost awareness. So noticing how distortions show up and actually shape the choices that you're making in your life. If you listen to me often, you'll have heard me say that awareness is 50% of all of it. The second thing is to heal, tend to your wounds, not try to erase your past or move on or not look at it, because whether you like it or not, your past and your present are constantly merging. So learn how to change your relationship to it through compassion, through discernment, through care and love. Third thing is authenticity. Be willing to take off the masks and show up as your whole self, especially when it's scary. Maybe not in all environments with all people, but find the core people in your life that you can take off the mask with and you can be honest and more embodying of your wholeness, which means the good, bad, and the ugly. And then lastly, presence. Really, truly, when we find ways to practice mindfulness and practice meeting life as it is, not as the distortion paints it to be, so much can shift just by holding that loving presence. You don't have to do anything, just work towards being more present with what is. When we commit to taking that radical responsibility and reclaim within, distortions truly can become our teachers instead of our prisons. They'll guide us back into alignment with the sacredness of life when we learn how to listen to them and understand them and meet them with compassion, meet them with understanding. It will remind us then that even the most painful stories can be doorways into deeper connection. They're always going to exist. Distortions are always going to be here on some level, but they actually don't need to define us. When we learn to take responsibility for how we perceive and how we respond to the world around us, we actually then reclaim the power to live from more of our wholeness. And that place, the sacred, is no longer then hidden away from ourselves. Self-awareness, healing, authenticity, presence, they're not just practices, but they're a way of actually bowing to life, bowing to God, ways of saying, I remember. Thank you so much for being here today and supporting this creative expression. It's been such a journey. It's been really fun and really wild. It's a very confronting thing to do, is to sit here and speak to all of you, but to myself first and foremost, right? In recording this with me. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you for tuning in. I value your time. I value your hearts. I value your energy so very, very much. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for joining me on this crazy, beautiful journey of reclaiming within. We are in this together. I am not above you. I'm not behind you. I am with you. And I hope that these concepts and of consciousness that I keep pulling apart hit you in all the right places and help you feel just that you're not alone. We really are in this together. So many blessings to you.